It's my really great pleasure to host this event on women in planning. The Cyber Agora is an open and inclusive space for initiating global debate and knowledge exchange and for sparking new ideas. And it's a place where, all voices are welcome and where listening and questioning is just as important as sharing. In the spirit of coming together, I'm thrilled that between our two sessions, we have represented over 150 men and women from 60 countries worldwide, and a fairly equally distributed across the global north and south. To make the most of our time, I'm going to keep my intro short, and our program consists of 5-minute speaker presentations by our panel, followed by an open Cyber Agora discussion where participants and panelists will be able to dive a little further into the topic of women in planning. And so now, without further ado, I'll hand off to Elisabeth Belpaire.
Thank you, Kate. First of all, thank you very much to our wonderful panel of speakers and to all you in the audience to be part of this event. 2 weeks ago, my family was discussing the International Women's Day during dinner. And my daughter, 12, says, "Can you imagine that everything would be turned around? Women would be leading the world. Actually, Black and colored women would be leading the world." An inspiring thought from a young teenager. Today, however, despite progress over the last decades, UN estimates that gender equality in the highest positions of power will not be reached for another 130 years. The COVID pandemic is having also disproportionate negative impact on women, including women's leadership. A recent study on women in planning from the Royal Town Planning Institute tells us that only 5% of women hold a position of senior executive or senior leadership position in the private sector in UK. It also reminds us that the lack of diversity affects the way we design and plan, but also who we design and plan for. And a recent number from World Bank, worldwide in architecture, women are occupying just 10% of highest ranking jobs in the world's leading firms. So cities have historically been planned by men, reflecting traditional gender roles. At ISOCARP's recent World Planning Congress, we had a good diversity and gender balance of planners chairing the Congress tracks. As an international society, we promote diversity and global exchange of thoughts. But also ISOCARP can do better. A better representation in the boardroom and in leader positions. For example, since 1965, since the creation of ISOCARP, only 1 out of 17 presidents was a woman. Women in leadership is crucial for creating responsive and inclusive environments beneficial to us all. It's also key for sustainable urbanization, and it's also critical for addressing the global challenges we have, such as climate change, pandemic, biodiversity loss, and the fourth industrial revolution. Personally, I have been privileged to live and work in different parts of the world and meet some of these women leaders. I've seen the power of women leaders bringing large-scale change in diverse planning areas. For example, Somsuk Bonyobancha in Thailand, who I met as part of my work in Vietnam. She showed the force of community and linking people systems with government systems in planning, shifting the power. I experienced the strength of women grassroots groups, but also found out how important the format of participation is and how important it is the provision of a safe space for women to feel free and share, learn, and get empowered. Meeting Helle Sobold, all known to you as the prominent global leader of people-centered planning, was also very inspiring. And then a couple of aspects where I experienced in the different contexts how planning affects daily lives of women. First, some of them are more invisible. For instance, security of tenure or access to land. It impacts women's livelihoods, and women are still far left behind in this area. Or mobility systems. They don't reflect the travel patterns of a lot of women, and it impacts daily lives, seen, for example, in my work in Kosovo. Second, data. I think we all agree on the importance of disaggregated data, but how well are we using it, and who is it serving? And apart from quantitative data, I saw the critical impact of qualitative data, such as the lived and perceived experience of women in their everyday lives. How important are they currently in planning? For instance, the perceived danger of women can be more of an obstacle to venture out in the public space than real numbers show. And then there is spatial data at neighborhood level, an important tool for us planners for spatial equality. And when we overlap the different data, we see a disproportional disadvantage for young women of color, for instance, access to public space. This was brought home to me in a couple of regeneration projects in Belgian cities. And then finally, in more recent work, I was diving into the intersection of urban planning and health, focusing on the very young and the youth, and the dependence of the very youth on caregivers, which the majority of whom are women and girls. We know that our environment in which we live, work, and move and age, it affects our health and well-being, and that of the planet. And we as planners and placemakers, we shape that built environment. So we have to be mindful of these intersectional aspects, as otherwise the issues of well-being and health, human development, they fall through the cracks. So when we are working on technical aspects of climate adaptation, we have to also ask, what is the impact? Who is it really benefiting and who is losing out? We are honored today to also have the support of the Royal Town Planning Institute and the American Planning Association. President Wei Yang and Chair of Women in Planning Division, Corrin Wendell, will share a video message with ISOCARP and the audience.
Good evening from London. I'm Wei Yang, President of the Royal Town Planning Institute. I would like to congratulate ISOCARP for organizing the Women in Planning event. I'm the 8th woman president of the RTPI in its 107th year's history. I believe women's leadership will help to accelerate the implementation of gender mainstreaming in planning. This year, on the International Women's Day, the RTPI published a new research on women and planning. We argued that mainstreaming gender issues in local policy and plans can remove environmental barriers and create communities that are friendlier to women, as well as men, children, the elderly, and the disabled. There's a huge challenge facing us to achieve this. As the RTPI president, I champion a revival of spirit for a modernized planning profession. I believe the fundamental objective of the planning profession is to create a balanced system for people, nature, and society to coexist in harmony. Gender mainstreaming and strengthening international collaboration are some of my key focuses during my presidency. I had the privilege to launch the RTPI International Strategy last week. Also, I'm delighted to say that I have joined ISOCARP as a member, as I'm really impressed with ISOCARP's work. I look forward to working with you all in the coming years. Finally, I wish the Women in Planning event a great success.
Hello everyone, my name is Corrin Wendell. I am the chair of the Women in Planning Division for APA. I'm also a Community Development Director for the City of Little Canada here in Minnesota. And I also run a nonprofit called YEP, Youth Engagement Planning, that teaches kiddos about urban planning in grades K through 12. We are so excited to have Women's History Month happening here in March. And through the Women in Planning Division, since 1979, we have been uplifting, supporting, and empowering women in the planning profession. We are especially excited to celebrate all women planners throughout this month. And I became a planner about 15 years ago when I merged my passion for architecture and planning into urban design. And I love creating communities that are beautiful and equitable and really help people thrive where they live. And that is something that I've been passionate about and something that I love to talk to other women planners about. So we're so excited to celebrate with all the women planners across the country and across the world. And we are excited for all the fun things that we have planned this month. Thanks.
All right, and with that, with those inspirational messages, we're going to move to our panel of speakers, our women planning and planners and placemakers from across the world. And we have 5 speakers from South Africa, the United Arab Emirates, Kazakhstan, Mexico, and Australia with us today. Our first speaker is the Chair for Inclusive Cities and Academic Leader for Planning and Housing at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, and is the co-rapporteur for this year's ISOCARP Congress, World Planning Congress, Professor Hope Magidimisha Shipungu.
Thank you very much, Kate, and the organizer of this event. I would like to share with you some of my thoughts around and my experience around the leadership. Although initially I had thought I'll talk to you about my projects, and I realized that the time won't permit because I only got 5 minutes. So my experience in leadership comes in 2 folds, one being not so good experience and very good experience. Now, I just think it's important that we need to start talking about these issues as women. So maybe we can start discussing how do we move forward, because we are experiencing challenges in some instances. Now, my first experience which comes to mind is that I have come across some very good leaders and some very good colleagues who are male, of course, and of course female. And here, one who comes to mind is my current leader, who's Professor Kalema, who I work with him closely. And I find him, and the reason why I have to refer to him here is because of my next discussion, which I will make around my not so good experience. He's very nurturing by nature. He's a kind of guy who, when you're working with him, he will tell you that you got a potential, you need to do this. Even when you don't believe in yourself, you will actually wake up and do that, what he's suggesting that you do. And I think to a large extent, he ended up spoiling me, because I thought this is how the world is. Whether you're a woman or not, people, they don't see you as a woman, but they see you as a human being, because he's the leader of leaders and he does not see anybody as a woman or man, but he sees you as a human being. So like maybe my profile will indicate that I also serve in a number of boards, both local and international, and this is where I want to bring my other kind of experience. And this is where I find things very difficult, where when you're serving in this kind of boards, you have to work 10 times harder than your male counterpart. You have to explain who you are, you have to justify who you are and why you are here and what you are doing here. And this kind of gets into you as you're going around and as you have to make decisions. You must remember that you're put in these positions to make some decision or to influence some decision. And when such doesn't happen, then it raises problems and issues for those people who have nominated you. And this is my point of entry in those discussions, to say, what does this mean then for women who are experiencing this kind of 2 folds of life, where in some instances you find some very good colleagues that you work with and you're able to push agenda. What does that mean in terms of the planning fraternity that we are finding ourselves in? Because our profession, especially in South Africa, is male-dominated field. And we are pushing South Africa, there's this big, huge agenda of pushing women or driving transformation to make sure that we put women in leadership. But I just don't think we're doing enough, because if you're gonna put 10 women, sorry, you're gonna put 10 men against 2 women, you won't get any results you wish. My experience that in some instances, you will be coming up with some views, some ideas, which needs to be implemented. But just because it's 2 of you in that particular board, it's not going to be implemented. Nothing's going to happen, because everything depends on votes, right? So if we want to change, and if we are serious about change, when we talk about empowering women, we need to mean it, and also do that in terms of the numbers. Your numbers should signify that, because my experience that if you have only 2, you have 3 women in the board, I'm telling you, I've experienced this and I continue experiencing this, nothing will change. If you have those people who are actually anti-women. And of course, this is not a war declared against men. There are very good men that have come across, as I've indicated. Now, my question is, how do we then move forward as women in planning? How do we then make sure that our voices are heard? How do we come together as people and make sure that we register our concern, and we also obviously make sure that we drive changes? And we do talk, I mean, I think Elisabeth has indicated earlier on in terms of the statistics, what it's saying, but what do we do? What do we do going forward? And this is the question which it's always been like in my mind to say, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? Because in most of the times, because people who make appointments or make some of these decisions, they're actually not women themselves. So how do we move forward? Now, I've decided that there are a few things, and what comes to mind is that obviously I have enough representation of women in the leadership, but also as women, we need to people. We want to be treated like people. We want to be seen like people, not as women, because we know we are women already. We know we got men already, but we want to be treated the same way you would treat your male counterpart. The same way. I shouldn't be in a place where I have to find myself to feel like I have to justify why I'm here. I have to work 10 times harder than my male colleague. I just want to be a human being. Judge me based on my strength and my capacity. And I think this is the message I want to pass today. I don't know how I'm doing with time, but I think let me just leave here, then I will engage as we go further, because I was requested to just touch on my experience, and I've got 5 minutes. Kate, how am I doing with time there? Okay, so I think I will end here, then we will engage in the discussion going further. I'm not sure I'm doing time.
Okay, thank you very much, Hope, for sharing your experience. Our next speaker is a place thinker, an advisor of Place-led 4.0. She's also the founder of Place-led 2030 and has been consulting on pledges on planning in major cities in the MENA region, Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Asia as well. Our speaker is Nadine Bitar, and she speaks to us from United Arab Emirates. Nadine, the floor to you.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Elisabeth and Kate and all the team for this amazing session. It's great to be with people from all over the world. So I'm here to talk about really my journey, and I hope that through my journey you can see the lens of the women in MENA, how they have approached planning in different ways. So the first conversation I want to talk to you is the one I had with my university professor. I enrolled in the first cohort of the urban planning program at the American University in Beirut. I wanted to shift from architecture to urban planning because of the common good, the social good that I thought that planning could bring to cities. And in that program, I had really powerful female mentors. They have shaped the way I am, and I'm really grateful to Dr. Jola Mahsoumi, Dr. Mona Harib, Dr. Mona Fawaz, and Engineer Hana Alamuddin. And they really shaped the way I think and how I contributed through learning the methodology and the tools of the craft. This is a craft that I brought into my early career. In the early career, when I worked in Dubai, at that time, the leadership of Dubai was engaged in a very massive leadership program to promote women leaders into key positions in the government. And the public sector in the UAE have been very successful in doing so, although the private sector in the UAE have been lagging a lot in terms when I speak about the consulting, the international multinational organization. As they come into Dubai, they forget all about work-life balance policies that they have back in Europe or in the US. And we really suffer in the region because some of these diversity and inclusion policies are not enforced into the private sector. So I was given a very challenging assignment to promote me to leadership position. And I was also enrolled in a high potential leadership program with INSEAD into innovation management. At that time, I was responsible of a framework plan of 3 billion square feet for an urban extension of Dubai into the desert. And it was really hard to be the voice of the long term when the short term voice of program and projects delivery and the medium term voice of profitability and feasibility were really dominating the boardroom and the conference room and the executive committee rooms and all these small working groups rooms. But I had to be that long-term voice. And I learned through my mentorship and sponsorship, especially with powerful male sponsors, that we need to own our voice. Our voice is our message. And that voice is going to change the conversation. And I took that into the 40 developments where I participated, exporting practices from the Middle East globally, but also contextualizing practices that I have seen in global cities and other cities of the world. So I learned that we are part of a bigger global conversation, and I made sure as a woman to bring these global conversation to the boardrooms that I was part in, but also to the projects room that I was part in, because each project pushes the envelope a little bit. The third conversation we had was with myself, because in the mid of my career, I asked myself, what are the values I want to bring to the urban planning profession in my region, and how can this influence the global agenda? And this question really came when I attended Habitat 3 as part of the UAE delegation, and I was participating in the World Urban Forum in Malaysia and then also in Abu Dhabi. That was the first World Urban Forum in an Arab city, which we're very, very proud of. And in that conversation, I realized that it's about place as a combination, as a triad of space, community, but also the intangible values. As women, we owe the values of the community. We know the values of the region we came in. We know the values of the cities we are part of. And including women in that planning process in place shaping make the conversation about place not only more inclusive, but more aligned with the deep-rooted values of any place we can think of. And that is what I wanted to ask myself when I enrolled in the public policy program of the Dubai School of Government public policy program. But that took me to the last question I have. How do we lead the conversation? I thank Hope, because I think as women, whether we are African or Arab or European or American, we have the same question now. How do we lead this conversation? The UAE has just announced that each publicly listed company needs to have a member on its board that is female. Of course, that public sector vision is not matched by the private sector vision. And that's why I think that we need a lot of lobbying, a lot of mentoring, a lot of coaching, investment in life skills, but also a lot of sponsorship to make sure that women are represented from the region in global organization, but also from the region in regional organization. And this is where I am now. I'm trying to be the advocate of that place, of that voice in multiple global organizations. And I hope that we as women, we lead the conversation transitioning to the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nadine. And I'm happy to announce our third speaker, Dr. Madina Junussova, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Public Policy and Administration at the University of Central Asia in Kazakhstan.
Hello, thank you, colleagues from ISOCARP, for arranging this extraordinary event, and also to all my colleagues who are sharing the floor today with me. I'm happy to see so many bright and talented women planners. And I remember when I studied at university, I was one of two girls doing the bachelor in urban planning. Being surrounded by all these male cohorts, we already had a expectation what kind of life we will have in the future. Nowadays, I see that many girls are studying urban planning, which is really make me happy, and I'm proud to say that many researchers and many public policy analysts are becoming female. When I started my career as a planner 16 years ago, I had a chance to actually assist my former supervisor who was the chief architect. And when I started my planning career, I felt actually uncomfortable, not because I was among the minority, but just because of this top-down approach, which was always kind of unnatural for me. And I remember we did a rehabilitation of the university campus, and all the senior planners were busy to talk with the management team, and I was interacting with students, and of course their visions did not match. And I always tried to say, why we're doing the university for the managers? Why don't we actually plan university for the students who are going to use the university? And that was one of the issues that bothered me, and that's why I decided, I think maybe, I don't know, was it my female nature or something else, but I decided to combine the practical practice and my research. So I joined the research area. So at that time, I also discovered ISOCARP, and I became an active member. And thanks to ISOCARP, I've learned about actually participatory planning and something which is and why it's important to do research and understand the user's needs. And thanks to ISOCARP, I decided actually to really do my, my best to combine my practical and academic career. And I would like to say my great, I think, thanks to my husband who supported me, and he never ever asked about why you're so late, why you are always in traveling, why all this, planners are from field trip to field trip. But he was very generous and he supported me. I think that actually allowed me to do a lot. And I'm proud to say that I'm only one woman researcher in Central Asia with a PhD in public policy for now. And it's from one of the honors schools of Canada, Carleton University. And funny, but I have a very masculine position, which is called Senior Research Fellow. And a lot of people don't know if I'm a woman until they see my surname, which have Ova from the Russian past, from the Soviet past, and they know, oh, you're a woman. So sometimes with people, when they meet me after reading my work, they're wondering about that a woman can actually do a career as a practical planner and also academic researcher. And one of my recent career interests is actually woman economic empowerment and child and gender responsive planning. Why I started to really invest my time in studying this kind of endeavor, because when I was doing my practical work as a planner, I always see a lot of evidence about how women are shaping their living environment, and they're trying to make it comfortable and more livable. And we collected a lot of evidence from the field how women are actually mixing up the functions of the city by creating new small businesses nearby, like small shops, childcare, education centers. And we were wondering why women are so active in mixing the environment, but it was a simple answer, because they just prefer to have everything around. They want to have all the services reachable in a reachable distance from their living place. And also what I've discovered in Kazakhstan as one of the post-Soviet countries, that women are one of the main active groups who are protecting urban heritage. And some of the public spaces, they are always fighting with the real estate and this very aggressive developers, and they try to stop them because they want to conquer some livable space they've created while living in these districts. And I'm also started to do capacity building campaigns by helping these women to advocate their needs in a proper manner, so that they're heard by the decision makers and their needs are accepted and aligned to the new development plans. And also, I think the women are the most vulnerable urban residents, at least in Central Asia, because if you know, there are big families and women are taking care of all family members. And of course, they are responsible for delivering food, for taking care of kids, and a lot of other things, even taking care of disabled people. And they sacrifice a lot because they have to overcome long distances, and there are sometimes these big gated private communities where they cannot cross, and that it takes a lot of time for them to pass these territories. Sometimes they are late for their work, and they are really having big issue with the so-called urban violence. So there's not enough street lighting. And if you know that most of the women are engaged in these services like nurses and medical workers as the doctors. So they have to go back home over the night, and they don't feel safe. And in many cases, they become victims of the violence. And I do believe that as the planners, we have to think about how to make our cities safe for women, children, and make it more gender responsive and responsive to the local needs. That's all from my side. So I'm just starting to do my research in this area, and I'm happy if someone wants to join. And I'm also part of many advocacy group trying to collect evidence, making the cities more livable for women, children, and elderly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madina. Our fourth speaker is an urban health and regional planning consultant for UN Habitat. For our health forum at ISOCARP's recent Work Planning Congress, she jointly organized with ISOCARP's Community of Practice on Urban Health and World Health Organization a training on integrating health into urban and territorial planning. And she worked also with the public space and cities in Latin America. She is from Mexico. Our fourth speaker is Pamela Carbajal. Pamela.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Elisabeth. I'm very delighted to be here and sharing the floor with such a great and inspiring models. I'll share a bit of my background and my professional journey, which actually started when I moved alone from my hometown, Chihuahua, in the north of Mexico, to Mexico City to conclude my architect studies. When I landed into the city, I felt so insecure, lost, and even regret my move, honestly. I was completely in a new city, new settle, and so different from my hometown. While I was looking for an apartment and choosing where to live, I put myself a set of priorities. I wanted to feel safe, I wanted to feel free, empowered, protected, and more important, I wanted to be able to grow. Then I started working at the Public Space Authority in Mexico City. I really wanted to work there and I wanted to have an impact in the city I was living and I was not from. The Public Space Authority was a great opportunity for me to design and supervise constructions of public space around the city. But it also gave me an opportunity to print my needs, feelings, and priorities into the urban design. Now I understand how privileged I was to be able to bring my needs into the design of public spaces in the city I was living in. It changed completely the way I look at the city. It gave me a huge sense of belonging in the city where I was feeling very insecure. And that is something that every young woman that is growing and shaping herself should feel about the city they're living in, a safe space where they can be the best version of themselves. As I move forward on my career into urban and territorial planning, position I have right now and work on urban policies and urban health, I reshape my thoughts and deepen my knowledge and took my priorities from urban design to policy making, which added a whole new perspective and considerations that I was not taking, such as right to housing, land, right to education, to participatory processes, also the right to have health and well-being in a city and being able to be fully yourself. Along my experience as a territorial planner, I had supported different countries on their development of urban policies and territorial plans. And I had a particular experience supporting Bolivia on their development of the national urban policy and their social inclusive urban policies. These opened my eyes to switch my needs and opportunities from switching my needs and feelings on a city from what are the opportunities we can bring to the urban development. To conclude, I had two main takeaways from this experience working with Bolivia on their social inclusive urban policies, which one is that women are an economic engine of our cities and social development. Two, women are promoters of social and community cohesion in cities. And I have no more to say than thank you. And I'm deeply thankful for being part of this platform today, because I think these initiatives keep us going. And I hope I can, with my background, I can inspire young professionals to work on their cities and be part of the discussions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pamela. And it is my great pleasure to welcome our last speaker, my esteemed colleague, Juaneé Cilliers. She's the new head of School of Built Environment at the University of Technology in Sydney, and she is a fellow ISOCARP Scientific Committee member and served as the inaugural curator for the Cyber Agora and has launched, was responsible for launching the Cyber Agora. So welcome, Juaneé.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, everybody. I feel like I should say welcome, family. It's wonderful to have a ISOCARP family, and just know, we've got a network of planners across the globe I often feel very powerful if I say to my colleagues at work, the ISOCARP network. So there's power in belonging to a bigger group. And I think it's a very important topic that we are speaking on today, especially in this hyper-competitive marketplace. And I think gender diversity is good business. And I think it's a good point to recognize that. Gender diversity is good business. End of story. And women bring a unique perspective, ideas and experience, and we've got rich conversations. And sometimes that helps with the decision making. Again, as you all said, it often takes great boldness to make our voices heard, but it's essential, and we have a lot of opinions, and I think it's good that we do share these ideas with the world. I also think it's important to note that we've made a lot of progress. I was just, looking briefly through literature and things, and then you read about shaping the female city, Sustainable Development Goals and Safe Cities for Women, Gender Equality, and the City Alliance Cities for Women program. So there's a lot of things going on that's recognizing the importance hereof, and we should, we should be thankful for this, and we should embrace this. For me, currently, it's about asking, what's the next step? And the project that we are working on currently at the university where I at, so we're speaking about women in leadership, and how do you retain women in leadership positions? So often we see women climbing the ladder to a certain point, and then life happens, whatever, it's really difficult to keep the woman in this position. So what do we need to put in place to keep our women in leadership positions? So we are really engaging in women as leaders in the whole built environment and in related disciplines, and how women can lead the public discourse. So as I said, retaining these leaders. And for us, obviously, as a university's point of departure, it's education and almost equipping people with the tools and creating an environment to say, what do I need to have a flexible working environment, perhaps? What do I need to, communication skills to be able to go further and keep that position? So we are trying to set up almost like a new training center for women leadership. And I'll probably via ISOCARP sometime soon disseminate some of the information. And then we would really like to have key role players involved to tell us, what's happening, how do you experience it? Also input from our male colleagues to say, how do you see this going forward? How do we create a vibrant place for women in leadership positions? So for me, that's the next thing. We've already created an awareness about the importance of this, about the benefits of having women in the built environment, in the planning profession. But our next step is the leadership and really retaining women leadership positions. So I promise to keep it very short, Kate, and that is my mouthful in 3 minutes, although I think it's a topic that we can further discuss now with the remainder of the time. But thank you for pushing this topic and for embracing it in a sensitive and well-balanced manner.
My pleasure. So in the interest of, before we move to the discussion, we wanted to take the time to do a group snapshot now. That's been sort of a Cyber Agora tradition. And so we're going to ask everyone to turn on your videos. We'll be wanting to do that for the discussion anyway. So those of you who have the capacity, I'd love to have your smiling faces. And then I'd ask some of my ISOCARP colleagues to also take some screenshots with me here. All right, thanks everyone. So here we go. Taking a few.
Evidence.
Just want to capture the event and our participants. All right, thank you. And as I mentioned, do please turn on your videos. We'll have our speakers are with our event backgrounds, so you can see them clearly. I've been made moderator slightly last minute, but I will be moderating the discussion. We will have, we took this photo early so that we could go over time for those of you who are happy to stay on, depending on how the discussion goes. Our speakers have been kind enough to lend us extra time. We are going to start off with 2 questions that we received during your registration from participants, and then we will open it up to a more open discussion and a back and forth. We will allow for participants to use the raise hand function, which you can access at the bottom of the Zoom panel under reactions. You'll be able to raise your hand, and I, as moderator, will be selecting and unmuting participants to share a very short comment or a short question. And so that we can keep the discussion going and have a nice back and forth, I'm just going to ask that you keep it, to 10 seconds, 15 seconds, quick question, quick comment, and we'll put it to our panelists and speakers to respond, and we'll go from there. So thank you. Our first question is, my apologies, a very general and broad question, but I think many of the speakers touched on the question of what do we do now? How do we empower women? How do we keep women in leadership? How do we create an equal representative playing field? And I think the first question can be, or a related question is, what are the main obstacles to equal representation of women in planning? It's broad, but it'll be interesting to see the diversity across different parts of the world. Anyone feel free to jump in.
If I can, I think, studying the labor market in the different countries, especially in Central Asia, I would say that if we want to empower women, we need to change the rules. The rules for employment, the rule of employment itself, the rules for the social benefits, and etc. Because we discovered that women are very professional, but sometimes she's also challenged by sharing the role of wife. And right now we're doing the study on the COVID impact on women, and we see that they become overloaded by extra work. So they have to do their professional work, but they also have to take care of the kids on online education, and also have to take care of all other family members. And they're not extra paid for this, so nobody paid them for this kind of extra work. And I think if we really want to empower planners, women planners, we need to change the regulation of the labor market. We have to change the rules so that she's having time and she can manage her time, because in many companies, she become a victim of this established rule of working from 8 to 5 and all this, obligations. And we see now that with this COVID impact, there is a positive change, because she's working from home, she's more flexible, so she can regulate her own time, and she's becoming more productive. And so I think we have to really think about the changing the rules and making them comfortable for women planners. So we have to think about this.
Hello. Yes. Hi, Kate. I just I love this question, because for me, I have one answer. We need to really make the voice advocacy, global advocacy, more impactful. And from this platform, I call on all planning organizations globally and regionally to form a coalition. Let's form a global coalition of professionals I'm part of IFLA, the International Federation of Landscape Architects. I know AIA, International Institute of Architects. There are so many federations that can come together to really maximize the voice and advocate for the role of women, and also provide mentorship, leadership mentorship, and other upscaling. And maybe even sponsor some women to become part of boards, especially in multinational consulting companies that are really applying different standards and policies between regions. That's so important for women to have a global voice and to really maximize that global voice.
Yes, Kate. I think I just want to give my contribution on this one. What is delaying the process? Why are we where we are now? I think when you look at it from, I'm an academic, right? So I've been studying the promotion processes, and I realized both the criteria remains the same for both men and women. Like I said, I'm saying this is being treated the same. But I want to acknowledge that what Madina has said, that women, they've got added responsibilities, which we don't talk about. But when you go to the assessment, for them to move from one level to another, you're still going to use the same measure. It's as good as saying you run and run very fast with whatever you are carrying, and someone is not carrying anything and they are running very fast, and then you make a very same assessment at the end of the day. So I think the way in which we assess and the criteria of promotion in some workplaces needs to be revisited, acknowledging the other role that women are playing, but also we need the change of attitude. This is very important. We need to start changing our attitude, the way we see women and their strength, and maybe somewhere else is better, but my spaces which I've been operating in, I sometimes feel like, even find it very difficult. People, they just make it very clear to you that you're a woman here, and you just have to justify your stay and why you are here, and that's a problem. So we need to change that. Let's start seeing each other as human beings and not just as women. That's just important.
Thank you. Maybe we can go on to question 2, and Hope, I have to say that your comments about being seen as a human first and a human being resonates with me personally.
Okay, the second question, so these first 2 questions are in fact questions that also we received from quite a few participants when they registered. We tried to merge them. Second one is about young women and how we can create more opportunities for young women planners to gain experience in the planning field. I suppose because of the different contexts, it means for some it could be how we attract young women in the planning field. And for others, we have seen that in some countries there are actually a lot of young students and women with a great gender balance starting in the field, but then it diminishes. So there's different aspects to this. Who would like to answer this first?
Okay, can I speak about the second type? In the MENA region, we do not have a dwindling number of planners. Actually, we have the opposite. As Madina talked about, yes, we do have a higher percentages of female going into the urban planning profession. And I do think that in our generation, we were few, but in the younger generation, they are becoming more. In my work at the American University of Dubai, I taught an urban design study for 3 years. And in my own work, I really found out that, again, young planners, as they enter the field and as they grow into middle management, we lose them at the middle management role. Why would you lose them? I'm talking really about the MENA, Middle East and North Africa, because of life events, such as motherhood, such as taking care of an elderly mother or father, such as migration, because in the MENA region, we are seeing more migration from secondary city to large cities, but also from, for example, cities that are less economic, have less economic opportunities, to cities with more economic opportunities. And that migration makes the woman a little bit separated from her social support system. So we may need to create another support system for her. And this is where we need to really, I think, for me, it's about life skills. And really, that has made all the difference for me in my work. Sorry, my dog is coming into the screen. That made all the difference for me in my career, to have the social support system, and that support system where a young planner can call someone maybe with more experience, with more, what do I do if my child has a asthma attack and I'm at work? What do I do because, for example, my mother is sick at home and the labor laws do not allow me to have a leave? I'm going to tell you a very personal story. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer and she had to go into a mastectomy. My manager in the private sector gave me a termination notice. I was not allowed to work. I was put off work because I went for 8 days leave to support my mother into her mastectomy. The private sector needs to change their rules because women need to have a work-life balance. Thank you.
Maybe I can jump because I took part in the Young Planner, I think all the 3 times when I was eligible. Then I was coordinating Young Planners workshop that ISOCARP started almost so many years ago. I think this is a great program which started to be called Young Professional Planners after we'd had a great workshop in The Hague, and then some people from the Ministry of Housing of Netherlands said, no, this is not Young Planners workshop, it's a Young Professional Planners workshop. So I think we have to think about their collecting evidence and really investing in research to show that participation of young women and men in planning actually create innovation and change the outcome. Because if we don't collect evidence and don't show it to the decision makers that it was to invest in this young population, it doesn't matter. I mean, it will be only our voice against someone else's voice. And also, I really like our reports, Young Professional Planners reports. They're always full of inspiration, and I know that there are always some follow-ups. So some mayors like the ideas of young planners and they catch up. And when we have some young female planners, as a coordinator, I discovered they do pay attention to the sustainability, heritage, and resilience. So if you want to have resilient cities, I think we really have to connect and discover this link and collect the facts which prove that participation of young women planner can actually bring resilience to the cities, because they do care about this criteria. So I think we have to invest in research, and maybe we can collect some interviews with the young women planners and to collect the evidence what kind of role do they play in planning and how they're changing the planning profession. Thank you.
Elisabeth, I will keep it short because I do want to hear from the rest of the participants. Mm-hmm. But what I also, I'm back at the thing that we need to find a way to help with the retention of our planners. So exactly what everybody voiced, you start off in the planning profession and then at some time you become a mom or life happens and you can't keep up with the demands of industry, and there we lose a lot of people that could have been our future leaders. So it's really, I think, about giving the voice and the message that it's okay to be flexible and it's okay to not necessarily have office hours, but still do the job. So what I'm trying to really enforce at our workplace at the moment is to manage outputs and not manage time. I don't care when or where you do it, as long as it gets done. And I think for too long, our society has been fixated on office hours, and you should be in office to do your job. And that's not true. And especially if you become a mom, you can multitask very well. So, but it is a cultural and a mind shift to get people to be comfortable with working flexible hours and working offline sometime. And I do think that the COVID pandemic has in that sense excelled our flexibility towards that environment. Everybody saw it can work, but now it's for us to keep it like that and to say, you know, this actually can fit a female planner's life better. I will do the job, just not in the office hours or in the environment that was traditionally known to do it, but we will get it done. So it will take time and it's a cultural shift. But for one thing, I think we can start off by saying, I'll get the job done. So please manage outputs and don't manage time. But we would need to take a stand on it and be really strong about it in order for the world to change and be comfortable with that.
Thank you, Juaneé. I think both of you interesting points of alignment of with more alignment with the planner's life and looking at outputs. It's also interesting, I read in RTPI report from last year where they also interviewed men who took care of children and said, in fact, maybe some of the live events having young children might be more of a linked to these live events of getting children rather than maybe just being a woman, because he experienced similar impacts or obstacles as he was the caregiver of young children and of the non-availability, I think, of support infrastructure. Maybe somebody else of the panel who wants to answer from the participants can be either already on the obstacles or young planners.
Hi, Elisabeth. I might like to jump in. As a young professional, actually, when I switched from public spaces to territorial planning and I moved to live in Kenya, where I am based now, I also had this shaky moment. Should I quit? Should I leave it there? And I think it made me reflect, and it made me realize that I think it's very important to have role models for inspiration in urban planning. And I'm deeply grateful for this opportunity to meet great role models, but also I'm very grateful for the role models I have had. But also I strongly think that the work environment should be a place where you should feel safe and where you should feel listened. And that is something I value the most. And that's something that has kept me on the planning field so far. Just wanted to share that. Thanks.
And just a reminder to the participants that you feel free to use the raise hand function and I'll be able to see you and call on you. I would just add that, Juaneé, when you're mentioning managing outputs and being more flexible, to me that also seems to be something that would, help not just retain intelligent, smart women in the workforce, and provide a better work environment where they can be just as innovative and just as productive and just as successful, but also maybe provides opportunity to be just as positive an influence on men in the working environment. So, or anyone, not just women. So it might also be an opportunity to see where improvements overall can overlap with improvements that support women.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a very interesting comment from Martina. I can maybe just read it out. She says, we have to be careful not to use the flexibility of the COVID-related working practices and assume that women will do 100% of family duties and 100% of work duties, which is the case, I think, more or less, whether you work flexible or not. Let me not assume things on behalf of everybody else. But then the most important sentence, I think, is cities, neighborhoods, and houses need to empower the sharing of life duties, not allow women to work more. So I fully agree with that. We need to find the balance. But for me personally, being flexible does give me more time to balance these things and calmness to balance it, and multitasking between taking care of family things and working in between. And I do get the work done, but I also feel like I'm more available to my kids and to specific needs that might arise. But I agree with Martina's view. We need to overall, share the duties and in that way empower women. I see Anna's also raising a interesting question there, Kate.
My apologies.
Yes, thank you.
So I am not able to see her. I'm not.
Okay, so it says proposing women in leadership in general is an umbrella term basically for the inclusivity of structures and builds upon oppressive rules. So introducing women in competitive environment makes them follow the structures and demanding male behavior. So it's interesting, Anna, when we started this discussion with women in leadership and how to create almost like an educational program for women in leadership, the first sentence was, I hope it comes over as neutral, but the first sentence was, imagine a built environment being led by women. What would that look like? Will it look different? And for us, that's really the thing. Before we can say this is the ideal, we should strive towards that, we need to understand how will such environment look? What tools do we need? How do we need to communicate? What is working hours like? What need to change? If we're saying it's a male-dominated environment, how would it look different? And if we understand that, we can hopefully equip people to function in that environment. But that would be a really collective input from people across the globe, and especially female in leadership positions, maybe, to tell us what helped you to get into that position. At the university where I am, a lot of people in leadership positions does not have children. So is that an obstacle? How can we overcome that? So we need to understand more about this issue, but I think we're in a good place that it's okay to research it and it's okay to speak about it. And we should embrace that the world is ready to at least engage on the topic and then understand the environment and go on. Kate, we've got a very interesting conversation going in the chat room, and I feel like I'm taking over the,
no,
the
I mean, that's wonderful.
So you and Elisabeth should mute me now.
I like, yes, I come in because there is one which was a hidden message. I think the person didn't realize and had to leave, but I go back to it. Actually asking, it would be interesting to have inputs from also from participants. What is leadership? Is it just an appointment to a post, a position? I feel leadership also means those who have pioneered in an aspect, and in this instance in planning that was unrecognized before. Those left behind in formal procedures in leadership, but doing their best even with tight hands to join the mutual interest in the professions and so on. So what does leadership mean?
I wish there was a simple answer.
But what is the question?
Can I jump in on the new type of leadership I see among the women? I don't think that I've never seen a chief architect who is a woman and she's doing everything alone. I think that it's good when we have this tradition of ISOCARP, like co-reporter. So I really enjoyed to work in a team. So I worked with Piotr Lawrence, I worked with many different people, and we co-moderated and we co-organized, always this working of the team and team leadership. I think it's more natural for women to be part of the team leadership, that not she's one who is responsible for everything, but she's sharing this responsibility. And myself, I'm already part of the several networks of women and men, and we are calling ourselves team leadership providers. So we never say like, because I can be sick, yeah, so, but I'm working with a partner, and whenever I cannot do my duties, he can do the same. So we know we have the same level of knowledge, the same level of information, and sometimes it's a pair, sometimes it's a 3 people, and of course it's strange. Many companies shocked when they see like co-investigators or co-team members, but later they become more confident and they say, oh, this is a very good way of leadership, because we always can rely that at least one of you can be present in our events and respond to our emails. So I think this team leadership is more nature for female planners, from my perspective, from the Central Asian experience.
Yeah, if I can just come in here, and I'm just thinking about the question, what is it to be a leader? And I'm thinking, you see, I'm mindful of the fact that there are people who are called leaders, but they're actually not decision makers. You are leaders, but you cannot make decisions. And the decision, that's what we are talking about, because we have to make some critical decisions if we are to move from where we are to somewhere else. So my take then will be, when we're talking about leadership, we're talking about a person who will be able to be in the space where, at the end of the day, who will contribute towards making decision. And I'm not saying that this person should just be standing there and making decision for everyone with that consensus. Of course, they will consult. Of course, they will follow the due process. But give them that authority that you're going to make decision about certain things. And I think I was attempting to give an example about a situation where women, they're put in a position of power. So they are expected that because you are in this board, at the end of the day, you guys have to push agenda for women. So, and we advertise it, you know, our parliament's got so many women compared to the last year's parliament. But when you actually look at it, you've got 2 women against 10 men. And I'm telling you, decisions making in boards, they're based on votes in most cases. And when it comes for voting, obviously those women, they don't have power. So what I'm saying is that let's be mindful about that. Let's be conscious. Let's be intentional about it. If we want to put them in leadership, then make sure that you are putting them in the leadership that they can influence decision. Don't put 1 against 10 and 2 against 20. It's not going to work. And we'll come back here. And that's why we've not moved even an inch, at least in some instances.
Okay, I'm going to speak about the MENA again, because that's where I have more experience on. In terms of leadership, I think that part of being a leader, at least in these times of uncertainty, starting the 4th Industrial Revolution, where we saw disruptions happening and internet penetration and so much technology disrupting the way we think and even the way we plan our cities and the way we live. I think that a very important quality of leadership for women in particular is deep listening. And I really believe that in uncertainty, deep listening is becoming the #1 skill. And for a woman, deep listening is really curating the input she gets from different sides of the problem. It doesn't mean that she will only listen to her own voice, because that I don't want this to be misunderstood from my earlier talk. It's about curating the different inputs she gets and trying to have a deep listening mode. In most of the executive committee and boards meetings that I was brought in as an advisor for cities and for urban policy in particular, I realized that as a woman, I had the power to listen, whereas sometimes speaking made me lose that power. Because when you listen, when you deep listen, you find some important breakthrough in the way you can influence, persuade, negotiate, and even drive the conversation towards an outcome that you see on the long term.
So I've been following the chat, and I think a couple topics are coming up that we also saw in the registration questions from participants as well. And it's the question of...
Kate, Dushko
yeah.
was raising his hand.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, we can go to Dushko, that's fine.
Dushko, you have a question? We can unmute you.
Unmute, yes, thank you. Thank you, Elisabeth. Well, it doesn't have to be in this order, but anyway. Are men allowed to speak in this meeting?
That's very funny, Dushko.
I'm joking. I'm really...
Actually, but I'm actually
joking.
Here. Yeah, I'm going to step in here though and say that my question was specifically going to be that we've had some good comments in the chat mentioning that if we are going to advance women in planning and have this conversation, that there's a desire for men and women to be at the table together and be part of that discussion, and it would be important for them to be part of the solution too. So good timing. So Dushko, I'm happy to have you. Dushko is our chair of the scientific committee at ISOCARP. I'm glad that you can join us, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Kate, and Kate is of course the chair. Well, Madina has just talked about that actually, about collaboration and working together, and obviously men and women have to work on this together. I was quite taken by Nadine's very wise indeed, it's very important in any profession that is fundamentally collaborative, deep listening. And what I want to propose is also deep thinking about the nature of planning. I believe that planning is fundamentally a masculine activity. And I'm not saying that is like, that's great and that's how it should be and that's what it is. I'm just saying, historically, it has been so. I believe that for the past 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 years, it has been men who have been in charge of urban planning and urban design. They have been the big architects, the big engineers, the smart guys, and whatever, the creators of great plans. And some have not been, some have lived on paper, others have been built, and so on. So this profession for 5,000 years, to change that will take an enormous, there's a huge inertia here of millennia of male thinking about cities, about space, about urban life, and so on. So I want to just say that because the word leadership has been mentioned so much tonight, I'm sorry, it's night in New Zealand. The word leadership has been mentioned so often. I don't see how we can have leadership, and I do believe that women should take over to some degree leadership in collaboration with men, of course, but there should be a leadership, if nothing else, for that cynical reason, when men make a mess, when boys make a big mess, then mothers and sisters and daughters and wives come in to clean up the mess. I'm referring to the condition of the planet and climate crisis and the urban crisis and so on. So, but beyond, being cynical and just kind of making a joke about women always cleaning up the mess after men, in fact, historically, it is a situation for women to take over and bring in something more positive into urban planning. I don't see that happening if we only try to, improve the quotas and have more women as the bosses of the planning departments and so on. It's not enough. We have to think through the fundamentally male nature of urban planning for the last several thousand years. And only then we can have a radical change in the way we think cities. So there's got to be an effort in academia and elsewhere in practice as well. And this male idea of urban planning, man as God, looking from above, planning from above, and so on. Thinking, being grounded, looking horizontally around us at the society, at the needs of all members of the society, women, children, and so on. So there's got to be a completely new perspective on planning. So beyond deep listening, I think we need some deep thinking about the nature of planning as a historically male activity. The time has come to change that. We have to have something different from now on. So I completely endorse the idea of women leadership in planning, but it's going to be a serious intellectual task for a while to figure out what has been wrong for thousands of years with planning. That's for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a question from Martina.
I just would like to extend what Dushko just said. What this male idea of the city that was a city as infrastructure, a city of mortar and bricks and construction, and a city that was essentially economic, ruled by the rules of economy or by the rules of power in the big the big government, sort of like extending planning. That idea has already changed, is already changing. Okay, is a recent idea, but of course the climate change topics, but also all of these arguments that we have about happiness, about trying to reframe the context of success, etc., has already widened the perspective of what a city is about. And therefore, I think this is now the time, I think as women, this is now the time in which we can influence that agenda. The city of the male planner's city is already sort of like, has already run its course, is already recognized by men and women alike, that is no longer the city of the future. It cannot be the city of the future, it's only going to lead to disaster. So this is now the time in which we have to influence, and we can influence. And the role is shared by men and women alike. It's just saving our life for the future generally. There is a lot at stake. And I'm just saying, I'm very pleased for the newer generations, the ones that hopefully don't come with the baggage that our generation had, and they can influence that future.
Thank you. Sorry. And I have a question from Susanna.
Hi, thank you for this forum. It's more like a comment or more like building on that. I have worked with communities in the favelas in Rio de Janeiro and Medellin. I'm Colombian. And I realized I've never had an example of a woman who has been in planning. I have never seen a woman in the planning position in my city, in Medellin, or here in Germany. I work in Germany. And I was wondering about that, but I have seen a lot of women who are very empowered in their work house, in their work environment. My mom was very strong in what she did for us. And most of my family has been like a mother-oriented kind of family. And when I worked with in the favelas in Rio with the women there, they were the ones who were moving the community. They were the ones who were actually doing things for the community and creating social groups so they could support each other. I think it's very important, the leadership from the top, but I think it's at the moment, I'm seeing the planning profession going into capacity development for that bottom-up participation of women in shaping the way that their neighborhoods are being built. And I think that's a very important point that we need to take into account and that we need to bring into the whole planning profession, because it's not just designing cities, it's also basically bringing those capacities to people in order for them to be able to participate in the debate, to participate in the decision making.
Right. And then I guess I did hear something that we haven't necessarily done is specifically, we have such a nice global group here. And so I thought I would just pose the question of considering differences that developing countries might be facing, challenges that are different, and how developing and more developed countries can work together or learn from one another. And we are coming towards a half an hour over, so I want to be cognizant of our time. Would anyone like to respond?
Kate, I see there's a question higher up in the chat, which is a bit related. It's from Olusola. I don't know, Olusola, if you want to say it, or I can just transfer it. Okay, it's with regard to African female planners or yet to constitute a critical mass to impact on the planning profession. How can this be addressed? I think it's a very valid point. So who has some ideas? Is Hope still there? I don't see it.
Yes, I'm here. I wanted to attempt to address what Kate has just said about the challenges and the experiences. And I'm glad that we've identified that our experience aren't the same based on the number of issues, cultural background, and just basically I mean, the environments are not the same. And I think if we are to go somewhere and to work together, I think the collaboration will be the first start of it. But I mean, I'm talking about a collaboration which take cognizance of the country that we might want to assist. In other words, what I'm saying is that there's no answer to say this is what you need to do. You're gonna have to start by understanding the context of that particular space in which way you want to intervene. If you are talking about South Africa, there are a lot of issues that we need to talk about when we're talking about women empowerment and transformation. We have to talk about the apartheid and all this. So then after you understand the context of that particular environment, then you're able to come up with a tailor-made strategy for a country. So it's very difficult to sit here and say, yeah, this is what we need to be doing, all of us. I think each and every country, each and every place will require a specific intervention which will respond to their needs.
And that made me also just think about something that came up earlier, which was a wonderful call for sort of a global coming together and a joint effort to advocate for these things. And you bring up an important point, Hope, which is that a joint effort is important, but to understand that it can't be sort of a heavy-handed approach, but needs to be contextual and reflect differences in the local context. But still, the support and knowledge sharing, I would suggest, is then still important part of that.
I also miss Elisabeth's question. I didn't hear what she said.
Yeah, there was a question from Olosola, and I see that also Shakira is present, so that the female African planners yet have to reach a critical mass. So what can be done about that? Because there are so few.
Oh, okay. I think there are a number of things, and like I said, the context is very important. If you're talking about South Africa, I mean, initially there were certain programs which were not meant for Black Africans, and that is the history which I don't want to go into. So if we want to talk about the critical mass, I think that's where we are going now. We have programs from an educational perspective where we are now actually enrolling women. So I think what we need to do first, before you become a planner, a practicing planner, you need to acquire a qualification. At least that's my understanding and my logic perspective on how this should be done. So the question is, maybe this is the question directed to the academics or institutional kind of setting, a higher education instructional setting, to say, we need to be intentional, and this is what we already started doing in the University of KwaZulu-Natal, to make sure that in your admission of women, so in the admission of students, make sure that you are balancing the equation. So you have to make sure that you don't intentionally exclude that. So even when we look at the enrollment targets, we actually do that. And I think SACPlan is one of the professional body we are also sitting. We are also actually asking those kind of questions. How many students, female and male, you have enrolled, and that is important. Yes, I agree with him. We have to reach critical mass, and it's a process, and that's what we're working on.
Kate, I just want to comment on the developing and the development work. I think with COVID-19, this distribution is not valid anymore. COVID-19 has unraveled that as human beings, we all had the same experience, whether you are on the developing or the developed side. We all experienced physical distancing. We all experienced the death of loved ones. We all experienced cities under lockdown. We all experience the same mayhem of cities trying to match urban health with urban planning. And also, we are really sad hearing about the new surges in many countries. So COVID-19 has leveled the game space. I see that we need to think, instead of saying developing and developed and emerging economies, we need to talk about really what is the quality of life, or the livability, or the really social resilience of these cities. I'm talking personally now, interested in donut economics. I'm really following Kate Raworth. I'm really reading her books, and I like her action lab. And I want to see what donut economics can help us, because personally and on professional level, I think if I want to be a really place thinker, capitalism is not the way forward. We are going to go into a new economic system. And that economic system, yes, I agree with all what was said. It might be curated by a more nurturing mindset. And for that, I want to talk now more in depth, is that we shouldn't come into the new economic system blaming the male system. We need to come from a nurturing system where we acknowledge that the rationality in which male have been raised needs to be changed to more nurturing way, ecological way that thinks of the ecosystem. We are not the best species on Earth. We are one of the species on Earth.
Sorry, colleagues, I see that the hand is raised by my mentor, Judith Reiser, and I just want to jump up to say that I remember when ISOCARP, we have always this big issue of future of planning profession. But I think the most powerful tool we had, it was International Manual in Planning Practice that Teresa and Judith, they took care of, and I was assisting doing only my country background. I think we can launch something which is called People Responsive or Gender Responsive Planning Manual, international, and also to at least engage our members to collect some evidence about what kind of new approach in planning can be driven by this, giving a new role to women and men in planning. So I think we have to complete this event by really making action. And I think maybe Judith wants to add something because she's impassioned, raising her hand. So if you allow me, I would like to give her floor.
I've invited her to unmute herself, so she can do that. Judith?
Yes, okay. Just very briefly, I've made a few comments in the chat. I find this discussion extremely positive, extremely enlightening. I'm happy to be part of it. I made also the point that it's mainly women and not many men. And if we want to make any progress, we have to extend the dialogue. I saw Dushko was saying something. I share some of his points of view, not all, of course, but I think it's very good that he said something, because I think without the agreement of those who actually hold the power and have held it in planning for thousands of years, we are not making any kind of inroad. So we have to be very realistic about all this. And so my very concrete question is, I think there are so many very important points which have been raised in this discussion. what is happening with this material, with the recording, with the chat and so forth. I really believe it's very important to valorize that, to write a report or something, take out the major points, see whether we can actually constitute some kind of very concrete, narrow, but practical projects to advance one or the other point which have come up here, and make sure that we have a broad, inclusive membership of these type of working groups, i.e. across generations, across genders, across countries, across cultures. So that would be my wish, and I'm quite happy to participate if anyone wants me to.
That is a wonderful place to sort of conclude almost. Thank you, Judith. I share your sentiments, especially on the importance of having an inclusive space and inclusive conversation. I think that we've attempted to do that here today, and it's been a really wonderful, diverse group. As far as the outcomes of the Cyber Agora, it is about bringing up ideas in this inclusive space, and we've done that today. We have a recording of today's events, and that will be made available on the ISOCARP website. In addition, I'm going to be trying to save the questions, all the comments in the chat. Jonas, if you can do that for me, because I think there's a lot there that I personally have missed. But also, I'm personally the curator for the something called the Planners Lab. So both the Cyber Agora and the Planners Lab are sort of virtual spaces and places for collaboration. Coming out of this, we will be taking, and I will be taking a look at the transcript from and rewatching this event, and we will be summarizing and posting sort of a summary and outcomes and takeaways from this event. So I think that's a place to start. And then I would also reiterate the call for us to come away with this event and take this message back to our own places of work and our environment and continue the advocacy. And part of the importance is awareness of the issue and then moving it to action. But I'm going to go back to Judith's point of action. I think we've all asked the question here today, and we've reflected on what the next steps are, understanding barriers and obstacles and challenges, but really jumping right in. And there have been many ideas today that we should not forget and really take forward. So with that, I think, oh, go ahead.
I'd just like to add to this because I think it's very valid. This initiative, of course, of Women in Planning was something I really strongly wanted to do, and so do a lot of others, and that's why it materialized. And on purpose, we also wanted to have these 2 sessions to allow more participation from different corners of the world and get more diversity. I think that's important. I saw during the Virtual World Planning Congress that was not always possible for everyone. The deep dive will be possible in the Planners Lab, like Kate was saying, and I think there are some topics that we have seen here that might become just a topic on its own in one of the Planners Labs. And myself, I'm in the World Planning Congress team, so my drive is anyway to keep that topic alive also on the stage in the World Planning Congress and within the internal policy, for instance, of ISOCARP. And then, of course, see how we can grow this network, because among the people that registered, there have been several that are very interested to build upon this initiative and see what we can do in terms of building a larger network in different parts of the world. So no concrete actions fixed yet, but I think this is a nice start, and there was a lot of interest. So thank you very much to all. And I'd like to extend an invitation to the World Planning Congress also before it's ended, which will be in November in Qatar, hosted by Qatar. And the title is Unlocking Planning, New Times, Better Places, Stronger Communities. So you're all welcome.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for attending. And I think some of you may be registered for the later session. In any case, both sessions will be posted online, and the speakers' bios are also on there if you want to check back and read a little bit more about their experiences. All right, thank you.